even on that larger playing field, what I want to engage in more is how do we bring the two together, like Martin Luther King envisioned. He envisioned it on a personal level, but also on a societal level. It's like, this is where justice begins. When you bring power and love together, there needs to be corrective action, not just talk. There needs to be love and generosity, but there needs to be repair, right? Redistribution. There needs to be real things happening to attempt to repair the damage and the hurt and the pain that's been caused. And I feel like it's so big sometimes, it just overwhelms me, but it feels like that's what my purpose in life is.
Hello, I'm Rory McKiernan and welcome to the Love and Courage podcast. Before we begin, I want to give you a little bit of the backstory to this great episode, so please bear with me for just a few minutes. I had a huge response from people from all over the world who listened to the Christy Moore episode, and one of the most unexpected things to come from it was the number of men who said to me how they connected with Christy's experience of losing his father at a young age. They mentioned their own experience of losing their fathers and how they never quite processed it or got to talk about it, and I was really struck by that. The area of men's well-being has been a big interest of mine for several years now. I've been through plenty of my own struggles along the way, as I think is part of life really, but I've definitely found that the cultural conditions and there isn't always adequate space or support for men to express ourselves and to be heard, to be vulnerable, particularly when it comes to the deeper aspects of our lives and our emotional lives. And if these aspects don't find acknowledgement, expression and healing, then it's really easy to see how it can inform or lead to or aggravate, general disconnection, disempowerment, anger, addiction, depression, even suicide. And at the same time, it's important for us men to stand tall, to claim our power in healthy, positive ways, to claim our voices, to be heard, to share our gifts and to shine bright in the world. Just as we need women to shine bright and bold in the world, so that it's really about power with rather than power over. And I think that's part of where we need to go as part of this whole gender debate and gender conversation. We need equality, we need justice, we need love, we need courage, we need transformation. And we need more conversations and explorations. And that's what this podcast is intended to do, this particular episode. It maybe doesn't have all the answers, all the solutions, but I don't believe anyone does. I believe that it's a dialogue that we need to engage in and learn from each other and really listen to each other. And so it was a pleasure to listen to David on these issues, and we can debate and explore some of them. And I'd like to hear what you think about it afterwards. I definitely see all these issues play out all the time in my own life and through my mentoring workshops. But you can see them at play in our homes, in our relationships, in our communities, in our workplaces. And definitely you can see it in our politics, the underbelly of unresolved emotional needs manifesting in poor leadership and poor decisions. Hence, we need to cultivate and tend to the emotional realm and to help create positive young people and healthy and strong young people, men and women together, so that we can build this new world together. I think that's therefore all our interests are in this culture shift, in a radical culture shift towards a more compassionate world. And for me, for men anyway, I think there's definitely something about downing our armour and courageously letting our hearts be seen, but also to ask others to see it and to hear it and to listen. And for us, ultimately for men, to find our true power, our true healthy, positive, loving power that David talks about in this episode. I'm lucky to know many great men already doing great work in this area, and I can see loads of men's groups starting to form, and many have been going for many years, and there's definitely a lot of good work being done, but definitely more is needed. One of the groups I've worked with in the past has been the Gaelic Players Association, the representative body of male inter-county football and hurling players here in Ireland, and it's great really to see more sports leaders, and they act as mentors and role models to inspire younger guys, to show them the positive aspects of life, that it isn't just about being a leader on the pitch, it's about being a leader in your own life and a leader of your own heart, your own destiny, if you like. I'm doing more and more talks and workshops in this area, and also hoping to offer a men's retreat in the coming months. So if you want to talk to me about any of that, my coaching, campaigning, consultancy, speaking work, all you need to do is email hello@loveandcourage.org, hello@loveandcourage.org. And as I said, this whole realm of men's development and well-being is the main theme of this latest episode, but it also touches on much, much more. It's an interview with the big-hearted Jan Jurasek. David was a child refugee who, with his family, escaped the regime in former Czechoslovakia before eventually ending up in Canada. There he grew up struggling to make sense of the loss and the trauma that he'd experienced, and he eventually turned to creative expression and martial arts to help him channel his emotions, before later training as a child and family therapist. He's since become a husband, a father, a co-author of a series of children's books with my friend Jack Manchester, and together they've developed a wonderful therapeutic martial arts program called Young Warriors, and that has expanded into more than 15 schools throughout Canada now. And as if that wasn't enough, I don't know where he gets the time, but David also runs an improv company called Inspired Playback Theatre, which focuses on reflecting back with compassion and empathy the true stories of diverse audience members who are not always listened to. Recently, David also had a brush with cancer, which he says he has thankfully recovered from, but it has really helped him check with his life, check where he's at, and to reconsider his purpose. But he's a guy who's very much connected to that purpose, as you're about to hear. I was introduced to David by Jack, who I mentioned during a recent work trip to Canada. I didn't know much about him, but I was happy to go on Jack's recommendation. And as with all my interviews, it was really a gut feeling. I'm not always that interested in whether somebody's known or well known or celebrity or not a celebrity. I just had a good feeling, and I definitely wasn't disappointed when I met up with him. And before we begin, if you can take another minute to bear with me, I just want to say a really big thanks to everyone who supported and shared the podcast, and particularly those who've chipped in along the way. I don't take your support for granted. It's a labour of love, and I definitely don't make any money from it. Any funds raised goes straight back into the kitty to pay for production and promotion and so on. So if you're one of those listeners from all around the world and you feel that you'd like to be part of it, to chip in, all you need to do is throw $5 or €5 once off or monthly over at loveandcourage.org. That's loveandcourage.org. And this also helps sustain my campaigning, community and solidarity work that supports others. And a big thanks to new donor Mary Brennan. And a very special thanks to long-time supporter Deborah Irwin, who's a great youth and civic engagement consultant and trainer based up around Belfast. She's been a huge supporter of the podcast since the beginning. And also, as usual, a big thanks to all my monthly patrons, to Dara Twamley for production support and to the Gaelic Players Association for their kind support. I also want to say a big special shout out to my friends at Suicide or Survive, that's suicideorsurvive.ie, who are doing great work in the area of emotional well-being and suicide prevention. So, finally, if you're not already following me on social media, you can find and tag me, Rory McKiernan, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn, and you can get email updates if you sign up at loveandcourage.org. So thanks so much for bearing with me throughout all those announcements. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your ears, and you won't regret staying the distance to tuning in. Without further ado, let's get this episode started. Here is my interview with the wonderful Jan Jurasek. David, thanks so much for having me to your home here in Toronto. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure and honour.
Can you tell me a little bit about your family home here and who's in the household? Because there's a lot of life going on as we speak. There's some cooking and playing and planning and all sorts happening.
Yeah. We have this in Toronto. It's a very hard to find a place to live, renting or buying, and we happen to secure this little corner of the far east part of Toronto, and it's a pie-shaped loft. It's a little house, and it extends into a big backyard that I want to show you later. And right now, it's my wife Maria and my daughter Sophia in the kitchen with my mom, with grandma, and they're cooking up a feast for later.
Sounds good. Yeah. I think there's some pie in the oven or something like that.
Yeah.
And so you've bought this home now, or you're renting? Or?
Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. It's I don't know what it's like in Ireland, but here it's just like it's completely unaffordable. And by the fortune of a lot of family support and different people, we've been able to buy a house so we can have our own little farm in the city.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose I'm curious about housing because it is something I'm personally affected by at the moment. It's a very similar issue in terms of affordability, and it seems to be
replicated throughout the Western world at the moment. And I had some chats recently about people in relation to how it's actually affecting their well-being and the various kind of layers of anxiety or stress.
Yeah.
And then, you know, perhaps an element of like how self-worth can kick into that, because it feels that in Maslow's hierarchy, that shelter is obviously at the very first stage.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a big thing to be able to build a home these days.
Oh, yeah. To have a place to call your own. I mean, and then there's the mortgage and the money you sink into it. But to feel like you're not going to get kicked out by a landlord, or your rent isn't going to get jacked up, you know, to have some sense of control over the place you call home, I think is just, I wish everyone had that, you know. And I feel incredibly lucky that, I mean, for most of my life, I was transient, moving around, moved like 37 times. So I was renting, living like a hippie, right? So this is the first time in my life where I've like, oh yeah, we have planted roots and we can grow our own food in the backyard, and we can maybe have animals one day, and, you know, and have a place to really settle into. Yeah.
And the whole area of planting roots is obviously a big one for your family in particular, given the very little I know of your backstory of how your family came to Canada. Can you go into that a little bit for me, and maybe talk about your childhood and how that sort of evolved into eventually moving to Canada?
Yeah. So I kind of feel like I have two themes in my life right from the very beginning. One is I loved my family growing up in a little village in Czechoslovakia. I was under communist control. I was born in the 70s, so it was in the late 70s, early 80s. And I just remember loving hanging out with my grandmas and my aunties and just feeling a sense of community and belonging. But I also felt, even from like 3 or 4 or 5 years old, I felt like I didn't belong. So I felt like my parents used to joke and say, you know, when you don't behave, we're going to send you to the gypsies. You know, and gypsies were like the worst, right? You didn't want to be with the gypsies. It was like a bad thing. So I actually started to fantasize from 5 years old that I would run away with the gypsies, that I felt like I belonged more with the gypsies. Because I would look around and I would feel out of place, even in places where I obviously, you know, was born there, I had roots there. So when I was 7 years old, my parents woke me up one morning and they said, you know, we're going on a trip. I said, where are we going? Oh, you know, we're going to Yugoslavia, this other country where we had some relatives. But there's a fear and panic in them. You know, I was very sensitive. I picked up on that. I knew something was off. And so we went on this vacation. And then after a few weeks, my parents had to sit my brother and I down and say, you know what, we're trying to escape. We're trying to seek asylum, and they wouldn't give us asylum in Yugoslavia, so we were stuck. If we went back to Czechoslovakia, we would go to jail. My parents would go to jail. I would go to an orphanage with my brother. So because we declared wanting to leave, right? So we were stuck in this country trying to figure out how to get out. So we had to just like knock on a lot of doors, go to churches and say, can you smuggle us out of Yugoslavia? And eventually we got some help, and we had to cross a mountain at nighttime. A little family, you know. We had to walk over where there's a border crossing, and then we had to go into the mountainside and go through the mountains. And we ended up in Austria. And then we were refugees for many months. And then eventually we got taken into Canada. And what's remarkable is that there were like thousands and thousands of people from Eastern Europe escaping, right? But nowadays you can't do that. Like, we're so lucky. There was this window where, for so many different factors came to play, that we could come to Canada, start a new life, be supported by the state for a few years to really plant our roots. And then we moved around a lot because of economies in different parts of Canada until we found a place that we could actually live. But nowadays you can't do that. And that drives me nuts, you know, when I see refugees and people trying to escape worse worlds than we did. We had economic oppression. We had corruption. My parents could be thrown into jail, but like when I look at people coming from Syria, right? People are getting bombed and killed, and how nowadays, how hard it is to get in. I just feel incredibly lucky that we made it. We just got in through the door. And then that formed my childhood. And then moving around so much helped me to see how different people lived and how, 20 years later, I took my mom, my grandma, and my aunt back to where we escaped as refugees in Yugoslavia. And this was after the Yugoslavian war. So it was pretty ravaged. You could see lots of signs of villages destroyed. And we traced back the route that we crossed the mountain. And it was just so striking to me to go, wow, look at that. And I interviewed people about where do they feel at home. I interviewed dozens and dozens of people. Gypsy kids on the street, people who lived in a farmhouse in Austria, people who lived in Yugoslavia, along that route, right? And I said to them, where do you feel at home? Do you feel at home? Would you rather be somewhere else? And it was so fascinating because that sense of place, right? There were some people who were like, I've been here for my whole life. My parents, my grandparents have been here. I love it here. I don't want to go anywhere. And there were other people who were like, I can't wait to get the fuck out of here. And then there was this one gypsy girl who lived next to a fountain. And I said to her, where do you feel at home? And she said, right here. Do you want to be anywhere else? Sometimes we go over there, sometimes we go there, but it doesn't make a difference. Her sense of herself in the world was more rooted than other people. So it made me really reflect on that sense of like, as a human being, how I feel that I can, fit in anywhere and be out of place in some ways, but how there's a decision that happens inside somewhere to say, I'm going to be here. Even if the people around me don't tolerate me or like me, I'm going to find a way to claim my space here. That's a lot. I just told you, but...
Was there anything in particular about your family that led them to want to escape?
Yeah.
Obviously, it was in the air and many people were trying, but was there anything in the sense of your parents?
Yeah, I'd say my dad is really stubborn and he doesn't like... he's somebody who thinks you work hard, you deserve a good life. And he's an engineer and he worked really hard. And he saw other people who surpassed him. And because under communism, if you like ratted out your neighbor, you got points, right? You got a better job. If you were corrupt, you benefited. And he couldn't tolerate that. Something in his system just couldn't tolerate that. Didn't want that for us as his kids. And I think there was also behind the Iron Curtain, there was this dream of like the West, right? Oh, it's so much opportunity there. It's so much better. So I think that the dream of being there and just couldn't stand it anymore drove them to want to take the risk, to leave it all behind.
How alive are those memories of that time for you now?
They made a big imprint, and this is sort of like the narrative that my family tells itself too, of how we got here and why are we here. So it's been all throughout my childhood, those stories have been recycled, And then we've had the great fortune because the wall fell. So we escaped in 1983, and then like 6-7 years later, the wall fell. So all of a sudden we thought, we're never going back. There's no way. There's no turning back. And now, we can go back. And we got to go back and forth and see the difference and how capitalism and the West and, took over the East and how it's changed. And so it's kind of been this thing that keeps coming back in terms of reflecting on my life.
So pick up your life then from the Canadian part of it, and how did you integrate then, and what was it like as a young boy?
So I'm the kind of person who is pretty sensitive. I'm not good with picking up languages per se or remembering stuff, but I'm very creative and sensitive. So I found it funny that when we came to Calgary, one of the first places we lived, I didn't have to go to English as a second language class. There were kids who were native speakers from Canada in ESL, and I didn't have to go through it. So I kind of faked my way. I'd watch the teacher and the kids, I'd hear words, and I would pick up on the body language, and then I would fake it. pretend like I understood. So that was my survival, my gift as a kid, right? Is to figure out emotionally and body language wise, what the hell's going on, and how do I blend in and make it seem like I understand, and then eventually understand, obviously, right? But I found that remarkable because I saw that I could do that and other people couldn't, and then they would be held back, and so I was lucky in that sense. And then growing up, it was hard because I always wanted to stay somewhere, start to make friends, and then we would get uprooted again. Because I think something when you come into a new world from an old world, I think the common experience is you have to go through a lot of different testing of soil. Okay, you plant yourself here and you go, oh, this will be great. Oh, we just want to be safe, right? We just want a job. And then you go, oh, there's no jobs here. Or these people here are really racist, or they don't like us or something. We really can't stay here. So you have to move again. And so we had to move a bunch of times and retransplant ourselves. And that was hard growing up. But looking back now, I know so many people who grew up in one neighborhood their whole life, right? Itching to get out of there when they're in their 20s. And I feel like I had the fortune to see different worlds, many different worlds, and to discover the resilience, like a weed that gets planted, blown in the wind, and grows in the crack in the sidewalk, right? Then she's like, oh, okay, I'm able to do that in different conditions and reinvent myself and rediscover myself. But there's still always been the longing to, like, can I find the place to fully land, right? Yeah.
So can you talk to me about your life as maybe perhaps in your late teens, a time when typically people are forming their adult identity, their hormones are raging, sex, drugs, or rock and roll, or all of the above are at play. Family relationships, often the young male is at war with the father figure. It can be a time of a lot of flux. Can you give me any sort of insight?
Yeah. So, my dad and I, him being an engineer, hard-headed, black and white, and me being sensitive, progressive, we thought about everything. The death penalty. We were both very engaged in understanding the news and the world, and we fought about everything. Everything you could think to talk about, we had an opposing view. And my way was to try to convince him, right, and be like articulate and creative and even like try to have a conversation. His way was to call me an idiot. And my dad had a temper, so he would smack us around too. So there was a lot of fear growing up about getting on his bad side. And there, I guess, as you say, growing up as a male, as a teenager, I start to have that pride of like, fuck you, right? Don't tell me what to do. You can't, threaten me this way. And so I started to rebel, but I also turned inward a lot. I got depressed. I got dark. I went through a period of existentialism, painting and drawing and writing dark poetry. I went into that. I went into a spiral inside, and it wasn't until my 20s when I went on that trip with my mom, my grandma, and my aunt, where I rediscovered my passion and love for life. I just turned dark.
So the darkness was an emotional journey inwards, if you like. Did that find any expression in behavior or substances that sought to navigate all around that, or was it more just your own internal quest?
Yeah, I think it's a whole experience. Like in my family, food was the medicine, right? I guess growing up, it was the medicine to heal, but it was also like the panacea. It was the, if I don't feel good coming home from school, if I feel lonely and moody and dark, I just eat a tub of ice cream. And so I developed all kinds of like health issues and eating issues growing up. I experimented with drugs, but I didn't like losing control so much. So it wasn't until later when I discovered psychedelics and things that expanded my consciousness that I got into that world. I felt even odd even with my close friends, because they want to go out and party, get drunk and woohoo and release some energy, and I would be the brooding guy in the corner, wanting to understand nature of reality and people and what the fuck am I doing here, and trying to figure stuff out. I felt like I was in a cocoon of slow gestation. I was a much late bloomer than a lot of people around me.
And how did the relationship with your father pan out throughout that period?
I think it hit its head when I came to my early 20s and I said, I just got to get out of here. I can't stand this guy. I can't stand feeling trapped in this family anymore. I need to go and do my own thing. And oddly enough, my dad was really supportive. He's like, all right, great, let me help you. And I was like, what? No. I was conflicted about receiving help. I wanted to, I just wanted to prove something, that I could make it out there without his help. So I was very cocky, and I was also snobby as an artist. I was an artist, right? I was like, I have very important things to say. And so I just had to leave. I had to start my own thing and start to learn what the world was really like.
Have you since developed an insight as a father now yourself, but also to have perhaps a sense of empathy for what your father had carried?
Oh my God, yeah. I think it happened before I became a father, because in my 20s and in the early 30s, I became a therapist and I worked with kids, right? So I think when you work with kids, as a teacher, as a therapist, or some kind of caregiver, they start to project onto what they need, right? Obviously, like that, and a lot of them in our society are missing fathers. They have fathers, but they're not there. A lot of them don't even have fathers. A lot of single moms out there. So I started working with a lot of boys, and there's father hunger, right? And they would bring it to me, and it would evoke in me the desire to want to respond to that, to want to be firm but loving, to want to offer some kind of guidance, to play with them, to be rough with them, to get engaged with that intensity that they had that their moms couldn't really understand. So it awakened that in me pretty early on. And as I embraced that over the years and started to understand that and own that part of me, I started to really understand my dad. And understand even behind his violence, there was love. There was the intent of love. Imperfect kind of love, but there was an intent there to help me, even by hitting me, right? That's where that healing happened. Like I spent also time in therapy trying to unravel it myself and understand myself, but I think it was in the act of service, in the act of helping people, that I started to really heal and understand who my father really is and appreciate him. And understand the burden and the responsibilities that parents have. It's so enormous, right? Especially when you're a conscientious person. You want to be a good parent. You want to be the best parent you can be. You feel a lot of sense of weight of responsibility. And I really do believe people, we all are trying our best. And the problem happens that we just don't know any better. We didn't learn how to be more loving, how to be more compassionate, how to be more effective. We never learned. So we're just repeating the things that we learned, right? So I've come to accept my parents for all that they've given me, but also understand that I didn't get a lot what I needed. And it's my turn to create that in my life and bring that to my daughter and to kids that I work with.
And can you talk to me about your particular focus with young boys and young men in relation to the I think you call it young warriors, set the work, and why the continued emphasis there as opposed to women and adults and everybody needing equal support.
Oh yeah.
You seem to have
Well, I struggle with that because I've worked with so many different groups of people. 5 years old, 20 years old, 80-year-olds. I've worked with a lot of seniors. I've worked with a lot of men and women together. And I always get excited about any group that I work with. There's so much depth there when you actually come in with curiosity and you're just open, right? And of course I have my own preconceptions of, oh, these people are going to be like this or that. And then I show up and take on the stance of like, okay, I don't know anything. Show me. There's so much incredible things that you find in people. I'm sure you find that in just interviewing, right? It's like, oh my God, I never expected that. But there's been something deeper in me. I think this like calling that says, there are people who need you a little more. There are people who you can speak to a little more because of your experience, because of who you are. And they need to be spoken to in a certain way. Like boys, when they go through mental health or school, they mostly encounter really wonderful women who want to help them, right? And it's beautiful, and they're caring, compassionate. But if you have a father hunger, they can't meet that. And if they struggle with violence, they push, they punch, they kick, a lot of the women around them get scared physically, right? Because it brings up their issues as women and as girls growing up. That's terrible. We got to shut that down. But what I find with boys, especially, is they don't need to be shut down. And they don't need to be sat down and listened to verbally, because a lot of them can't articulate. They're not in the culture of girls where girls talk it out. They're in the culture of boys. I got a problem, I push you. Right? You push me back. And we work it out physically. We have a different way of communicating in our culture. And so I feel like boys need pathways, different pathways, especially when they get to the point where all those other pathways failed. And those pathways often need other men who understand, right? Just instinctively. And they need pathways where they can validate the physicalness, the intensity that they have, not shutting it down, but also teaching them, okay, well, you have this instinct to push, punch, kick, stab. How do we focus that so that you contribute to society, so that you create something good from that instinct, from that anger or that rage, not tell you it's bad and not shame you into submission and coerce you. So I find a lot of systems like schools very well intentioned, but a lot of times when they encounter challenges with kids, they coerce, they shame. That's all they know. They punish. They don't know how to teach and how to listen to these kids. So I've just seen that over the years, and I just felt, okay, I get it. I'm witness to that. Let me just fumble around, try to help fill that need that's not being met. And then over time realizing, oh my God, that need is enormous. And the things that I'm imperfectly offering are being gobbled up by the parents and the kids. They love it. They need it. They want more. Wow. So how do I train more people in these ways? To meet kids, boys especially, where they're at, and to give them the training that they're looking for, the initiation, the pathway to mastery that they don't have anywhere, or they get it piecemeal here and there. How do I help them and the parents understand that pathway and support that? And in the last few years, I've also been thinking about men. Once we grow up, how much we're still boys. How much, especially in family and relationship, right? I mean, I think we do pretty well with teaching boys how to do job, how to do career, right? Goals, tackle this, do that, show up. And we have a lot of help out there of productivity and success and personal development, how to get muscles, how to do this. But it's a whole different game of like, how do you have a successful marriage? How do you raise a child? It's not about goals and doing shit and getting shit done, right? That's a small bit, maybe. Taking out the garbage and bringing home some groceries and food and money. That's important, but our kids need so much more, and our partners need so much more from us as men than just the things we've been taught to do, right? So I find that again, from my own personal experience, got married, I struggled with relationships, got married, had a child, and I struggled like crazy with it. Even with all of my empathy and training as a therapist and working with kids. So it's just taking me deeper into embodying what I teach, and being imperfect and fumbling and learning constantly from my daughter, from my wife. I think I'm pretty understanding and compassionate. And then just yesterday, my wife and I had an argument where she smacked some sense into me that I was not listening to her and I didn't give a shit. I was shutting down and getting into my head, and she was right. And I needed to open up my heart. And it still takes effort and discipline and courage to do that. It's not like I've been doing that my whole life and it just happens, right? It's something I've had to learn. And I've had a lot of male mentors in my life. That's probably the biggest reason why I can do the work I do. I've had a lot of senseis and a lot of older men who mentored me, who showed me what is it like to be firm and strong, but also deeply loving and compassionate. That you don't have to choose between being hard and rah, rah, rah. Like my dad grew up that way. That's what he knows. Or being a soft, nice guy who caves in all the time and compromises too much, right? That there's a much more dynamic way to be a man in the world. Mm-hmm. And they've loved me and held me accountable so I could find my own power. And then I feel like I just have to give that back. I have to give that to the kids that I work with and to the people I train. And, I have to give that bar has been set high by the people who've cared for me and trained me. And so I try to live up to that and do my best and struggle. But I see that as that's the purpose of life, is to struggle. It's a worthy struggle. It's not oh, this is hard, I hate it. It's like, no, this is awesome. And I failed today. Fuck, what do I got to do to fix this, to make this right, to show up better tomorrow? So, so that's where I'm at with that's how I connect all the dots, working with kids, working with men. And I love working with girls and with moms. They're awesome. And they also have that father hunger. They're looking for how can they need to find out how to be a woman in the world from women, I think, right? Not me. Who am I to tell them that or teach them that? But they still long for someone who supports them, who backs them up, who's an ally, who understands them, but from a different vantage point. Not as a fellow girl or as a fellow woman, but as a man. There's a hunger in the world for that. And then there's this Me Too movement, right? And I'm online with hundreds of guys in different groups, and it's like, it's so hard for us. There's so many men that I think, oh, that's a great guy. I know this guy. He's so compassionate. And now he's just like, he can't hear this. He can't take this in. He's so reactive to this Me Too thing. He's getting all like about, oh, what about men? We are hurt too. And he's shutting down. He can't take it in. It's like, wow, we really struggle with this. The place that we have in the world as men. And I'm trying to bring to that conversation this I don't know, some kind of awareness that helps us to realize that we can be both powerful and loving. The thing that's been inspiring me the last few years has been this quote by Martin Luther King: "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic." Right? You let that sink in, and you think about how we grew up. Most of the time, I grew up around women. They taught me to be nice, to be good boy. And that taught me to seek approval and love, and to fear rejection, right? And that socialized me in a way, which is good. But a lot of the time out of fear. Not out of, there's an intention to love, but it wasn't you're accepted wholly as you are. It was if you can behave, if you are quiet, if you listen, if you are nice and generous, we will give you lots of approval and love. If you don't, you will get the disapproval, the rejection, the isolation, the abandonment. Gulp, right? Or you can choose that path, or you can say, fuck that love stuff. I'm going for power. I'm going to become myself. I'm going to rebel, and I'm going to create a career, get rich, be build up my sense of self. And that's great. That's good for building a career, but it's so empty if you don't have relationships, people to share it with. It's so empty up at the top. I've known so many guys who are like rich, who are running industries and companies, and they're so lonely. There's such a huge void inside, and they've just chased power. And I feel like when we're growing up as boys, we're taught from the culture of men, power. Love stuff is girly stuff. And from the culture of women, love, it's all about love. You can't do anything unless you have love and us, and we need to be, and I just find that just makes us feel divided and cracked and broken. And it's like Adam Kahane talks about power and love is like two wings of a bird. And if you develop one wing more than the other, then you're flying lopsided and you're struggling, right? They're both essential. And in politics, in the greater world, there's so much, a lot of activism is about love. Let's get together. Let's heal the planet. Let's solve these problems. Let's be collaborative. The people who hold the power don't give a fuck. They want to get richer. They want more power. There's two different consciousness, right? And so I feel like even on that larger playing field, what I want to engage in more is how do we bring the two together, like Martin Luther King envisioned. He envisioned it on a personal level, but also on a societal level. It's like, this is where justice begins. When you bring power and love together, there needs to be corrective action, not just talk. There needs to be love and generosity, but there needs to be repair, right? Redistribution. There needs to be real things happening to attempt to repair the damage and the hurt and the pain that's been caused. And I feel like it's so big sometimes, it just overwhelms me, but it feels like that's what my purpose in life is. Like I've got to do my best to embody that for my daughter, for my wife. And it makes me, actually, when I think about moment to moment, it's not overwhelming. It just means opening in my heart and bringing that awareness of martial arts that I have, was like staying in my power. Because there's as an empathic person, there's so much beauty and strength to that, but there's risk, right? Like if you start sharing with me something's going on and I lean in and I get really involved and I really identify with you, I can lose my power, because then I want to fix you. And I stop like tuning into myself, right? And healing myself and doing what I need to do. So there's power and love, to me, are very intimate forces that I'm thinking about and trying to bring into my world every day. And I think about it on a larger canvas. How to have these conversations that are paradoxical, that don't talk about one or the other or compete between the two, but actually say, no, we got to have both. Yeah.
How do you navigate the world of service, in the sense of doing this kind of work and reflecting and dreaming about it, but also letting it go and just learning how to be in the world? Because I often find that people, myself included, sometimes need to engage, but also need to let go as well.
Oh yeah.
So I'm guessing have a little child running around your house is helping with that at the moment.
Oh my God, all the time. I mean, to me, when I started seeing it, a few years ago, I started understanding what drives people. Because there's thoughts, there's feelings, there's behavior, but it's so easy to miss. It's like looking at the surface of the ocean and you miss the current that's taking you somewhere, regardless of your effort. There's these deep currents, right? And I started to see all of us have these deep drives. and you look at the behavior, the thoughts, and the feelings, you understand they're all just a reflection of this deeper current. And the two strongest currents for me are this power and love, right? So I see that in my daughter. There's one moment where she really needs to feel close and safe because she's scared and she just needs to be held by a parent. And then next moment, a second later, pushing you away. I need to be independent. Oh, I don't want daddy in my face. Leave me alone. And how do I respect that? How do I respect that assertiveness that's beautiful, that I want her to have as a girl, especially? And how do I not take it personally and just shut down and feel rejected, right? Because I'm human. And then the next moment, how do I turn on that love and allow her to jump on me and really embrace that and not push her away? Because a moment ago, she pushed me away. So it's like so immediate and present in parenting for me. As a therapist, I went through about 11 years ago now, I went through a burnout. And that taught me that if I'm going to try to help people, I got to have a fucking good time. I got to walk out of every session feeling better, stronger, more open, more loving. Because I know they're going to bring me the worst. They're going to bring me their worst pain, their biggest problems, their biggest complaints. And that's what I want. I want them to say, here, let's work on this, right? Let's dive in. And if I'm leaning in all the time, trying to help them, but I'm not tuning into myself and doing what I need to do while we're in that room or wherever we are, then I'm going to get depleted. I'm going to burn out. I can't help anybody. So I just decided, I started being more dynamic. I said, I've been sitting around all day. Let's go for a walk with my clients. Or, hey, you know what? We're talking a lot about assertiveness. Let's actually push each other a little bit. See how it feels to be assertive. I push you a little bit, you push me back. Yeah, that feels good, doesn't it? Yeah. Instead of, oh, I'm not so assertive. I need to be more assertive. Oh, it's so hard. So let's be more physical. Let's be more active. Let's bring some satisfaction and joy to this work. That can be hard and painful when it starts, right? When you start talking about something that's difficult, it's painful, it's embarrassing, you feel shamed sometimes when you're in a change process. But let's engage in a way that brings more vitality to it, so we both feel better. So, that's sort of for me where it comes alive. And then I've been seeing it more in as I become more of a senior, as a manager and a trainer, I see it more structurally. When you have meetings with people, God, meetings are so boring, right? So many, it's just like, oh my God, you could have sent me an email about this and I'm here for an hour listening to you, blah, 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 blah. So I try to interrupt meetings in a creative way without being a jerk, right? I try to interject meetings and interrupt in a way that brings a little more life to it. Makes it more interactive, makes it more conversational. Even when the people running it didn't intend that. And I try to do that in a way that's honest. Because, I have judgments, this is boring, or could be done better, but more authentically, I'm bored. I don't understand what you're talking about. I want to be more engaged. I want to help you to find a way to make this relevant for me, so I'm not tuning out and nodding my head like everybody else in this room. So I've tried to, that takes a lot of guts, though. I think on every level, but especially I find publicly being more dynamic takes courage. Because there's going to be some people who go, yeah, right on, man, you're doing the thing I can't do because I'm too scared. And there's going to be other people going, oh, what's he doing? What a rabble-rouser. He's so annoying. He can't just fit in a fucking box like we want him to. Damn him, right? There's a pushback. There's a resistance. And so I think it takes courage. And I also think it takes compassion. Because when you introduce something new and change in a system, there's resistance, right? There's fear. So I feel like it takes a lot of compassion for myself and the people in that system to help disarm some of that resistance, and that's natural. Yeah.
I want to go back to some of the areas you've touched on in relation to men's development, and particularly reference Me Too movement, and in that would appear to be the core issue of abuse of power. And when we then look at power and its relationship to sex or sexuality and sexual energy, can you speak a bit about the dynamic at play there and how it may be an expression of the lack of initiation or the lack of awareness of how to maintain power or to channel it or to grow it in a more positive...
Oh my God, I feel like our society misunderstands power and love so much, right? But especially power. Look at the presidents and the people we vote into power and we give our power to.
Yeah, I guess it's no accident that in the Washington incarnation at the moment, sex has followed the story a lot. So what is it about sex and male power that is...
Well, I think there's a complex enmeshment there. I think sex is so beautiful and amazing, but we live in a world that we're not taught about sex is joy, sex is connection. We are actually taught sex is maybe a fleeting pleasure, right? It's about, getting your rocks off. It's just a fleeting thing. And I think boys and men are taught by so many different ways that you have to take that, you have to steal that. That's what a man does, right? Gets that pleasure. You have to objectify the person you're going to get that with. It's so unhealthy. It's so distorted and twisted up that it becomes all about control. I hear about men who go to prison and they're raped. It's not about sex, about joy, about connection. It's not lonely guys who want to connect. It's about power. It's about making you feel like you're owned. Right? And I think that's the way, the consciousness that a lot of men have around sex is they're so twisted up and knotted up inside about love. They don't understand what love is. They think love is control. Terry Crews, I've been really following his story because he was sexually harassed. He's a male. He's an actor and an ex-football player in the US. And one of his agents groped him and made him feel that he couldn't do anything about it, that he had power over him. And he's this big black guy, right? And people, when he first told his story, people were like, what? There was people thought he was lying. A lot of men thought, oh, you're this big guy. What's wrong with you? What are you, some kind of pussy? What are you, some kind of, why didn't you punch him? Why didn't you unleash violence on this dude, right? And there's been so many negative reactions to him, and he didn't share the story to reframe Me Too as it's all about men. Some guys want to do that. Say, well, men are hurt too. You shouldn't focus on women. You should focus on... He said, no, I'm coming from a place of understanding power and how I felt that I couldn't do something. And I'm a pretty fucking powerful guy. I have millions of followers. I have lots of money. I'm secure in my life, right? And here I am in this moment, vulnerable and feeling disempowered. And I didn't do anything until after. And here's what he did. He outed the guy. He went on the news and he took some action. And he's been telling his story. And I feel like that's so powerful because when you listen to him speak and not just listen to his critics or whatever, he speaks about compassion, about fatherhood, and how he used to yell and rage at his kids, and how terrible he feels about that, how he abused power himself, physically and mentally and emotionally, and how he's come to realize in the last few years about how he treats his daughters and his wife, and all that, and he's talking from a place of compassion and love, but also power, real power. He's taking ownership for himself. That's real power. He wants to influence the world. That's real power. But not through coercion or shame or fear, but through example. Now, here I am. I want you to help you stand up too. Look at me stand up. It was hard. It's painful. But you can do it too. I'm behind you. I'm with you. That's real power. I think about Aikido and martial arts because that's where it's most physical and most obvious to me, right? If you attack me, right, and I collapse, right, that's me giving away my power. Oh, you're so strong, I collapse. I submit. You can beat me up now. If you push me and I punch you back, I reach towards you, I lean into you and I start pummeling you, I've lost my power again. Because I've decided you did this to me, you hurt me, I must destroy you. So it's no longer me having power, it's about you threat. So I've lost my power again. But if I can move skillfully, keeping my center, my sense of self, that's real power. And we just don't understand that in this culture, right? We have these crazy leaders who are they're attack dogs, they're bullies, or they collapse a lot. I think we see that too. We see a lot of leaders who, when they have to face the banking sector, when they have to face tough decisions, they collapse. So then we swing and we get this leader who's a bully, who's a jerk, who talks big but doesn't do the right thing either. And I feel like, God, we got to start like in kindergarten, teaching kids and teaching ourselves as society, this is what power imbalance looks like. We know a lot of that. We look around, we see a lot of that, but we can recognize it better. And here's what real power looks like. Here's how to get back into our power. Here are ways that we can all do that. Here are ways that we can help each other to do that. So we're not alone doing, trying to empower ourselves, but we actually are meant to help each other find our own power. And so I feel like it's such a big, deep topic, right? But to me, I feel like there's a really clear pathway. There are so many great people and schools like restorative justice, nonviolent communication. There's so many different schools and people who've been studying this for a long time who understand it, know how to, most martial arts, that's what it is. It's going from a place of attack and threat to a place of balance and power. So we have the map, but our society's pretty lost. So I feel like we need more examples. We need more conversations. We need more, for people to see where they can learn about their power. Everyone is individual too, right? Some people find their power by writing and telling their story. And that's beautiful. Other people, we need to do it physically. We need to feel that power, feel the edge of that power and know where we go too far. And that's, I'm more kinesthetic, so I need to learn that way. But there's so many paths to finding our power. And I'm excited to talk about it because I find so often, even like mental health, right? It's all about helping people. There's a power imbalance right there. I'm the professional. You're the one in need, right? It's already rigged a little bit. We don't talk enough about power. We talk about compassion and empathy and being, understanding, but we don't talk about power enough. It's so critical, right? Because I can abuse my power very subtly as a therapist. I can be really get into your head, understand you, you feel understood, but then nothing changes. You don't grow. But I feel really important and valued and, right? It's all about me. So there's so many places in our life where that plays out. I think everywhere, basically. And I think of it dynamically too. It's not like good or bad, good or evil. It's not like black and white. It's like there are places where we're more in our power, moments where we're more in our power. We notice that, we learn from that, and there are places where we lose our power. And it's this dynamic process of back and forth, till we hopefully live more and more in our power. And then the people around us benefit from that example, and they learn that themselves, Yeah.
David, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I wish you huge success in the great work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I feel like I have so much I want to ask you. Reverse the interview.
You're going to need to start a podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again, David.
Yeah.
Hi folks, Rory here again. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with the wonderful David Jan Jurasek. You can find out more about him online at powerfulandloving.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please share the love by spreading the word among people you think might be interested in the podcast, and consider chipping in over at loveandcourage.org. And don't forget to check out some of the archive interviews if you haven't heard them all already. Lots of great episodes there, well worth checking out. And as always, feel free to contact me at hello@loveandcourage.org. I really love hearing from podcast listeners, so even just say hello, tell me what you thought of the interview. It's great to hear from you. So folks, until next time, here's to you, to all of us, and to a world of more love and courage.